In this video, we are going to learn some basic pawn endings. Hello and welcome to Better Chess Academy, your go-to destination for mastering the game of chess. In this video, we are starting a series about endings and more specifically about pawn endings. I think that they are really important because more complex endgames can lead to pawn endings and because one single mistake can be decisive. Before we start, I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel and also make a like in this video and also join the team on Lichess because from the next week we are going to start playing in Bundesliga matches, so I will need your help. Let's move on to the video. The first thing we should know is the opposition. So in endings and especially in pawn endings, the knowledge of the opposition is really important. And what is the opposition? When the kings are in opposition, they are placed on the same file, rank, or diagonal with an odd number of squares separating them. So in this position, we have the kings on the same file and there is one square between them. So we have an opposition. But which player has the opposition? The answer is that the player who played last has the opposition. So if white moved from one square to e4, white has the opposition, and if black moved from one square to e6, then black has the opposition. And why is it important to have the opposition? In this case, it's black to move. So white has the opposition because white played last. We see that all the pawns are blocked, and the usage of the opposition is that when the opponent uses one square, we are getting into his position from the other side. For example, if black moves from e6 to f6, then we are getting to the other side from d5 and we are going to take the pawns. Whereas if black plays king on d6, we are playing king f5 and we are going to take the pawns, we are going to queen and we are going to win the game. So, after the opposition, we have to learn the rule of the square. So, the first thing we should know is whether the pawn can queen without the help of the king. And here, the rule of the square is going to help us. So, what we are doing? In this position, it's black to move. We are going to draw a square in this way. There are two ways to draw it. The first one is by counting the number of squares that the pawn has in order to reach the last rank, 1, 2, 3. Then we are counting sideways, 1, 2, 3, and we are completing the square in this way, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So, the second way, and the easiest one to draw the square, is to mentally draw a diagonal line till we reach the last rank. For example, here it's this one, and then a vertical line till we reach the rank of the pawn. And we are completing the square. So, the rule states that if the opponent king can reach the square, even if it's on the edge of the square, then it's a draw because the king can reach the pawn. Whereas if the king cannot reach the square, then it's a win because the pawn can queen. In this position it's black to move, and of course he can reach the square with king e5, b6, king d6, b7, king c7, b8 queen, and king takes the queen. What happens if it's white to move in this position? Then you have to remember that we draw the square not from the position we have, but from the position from the next move. So, if it's white to move, we are going to draw the square from the square b6, and it's like that, d8, d6, b6, b8. So black is not in time, and white plays b6, king e6, b7, king d7, and white queens the pawn. Now, some exceptions. We have to always be careful when the pawn is on its initial square. And why is that? In this position, it's white to move. Can the black king reach the square if it's white to move? The correct answer is no, because when the pawn is on its initial square, it can move 2 squares forward on a4. And now we have this square, we draw diagonally the line, we draw vertical line till the rank of the pawn, and we see that black cannot reach the square. So it's a win for white. And now we're going to see some exercises. In this exercise, it's black to play, and he has to make a draw. As we can see, the square is this one, so black is inside it. But he has to decide which move to make. If you thought king g2 is a mistake, because white can play h4 and the pawn can queen, because now the king is behind the pawn and he is not in time. So the pawn is queening. The correct move, however, is king on f3. If now white plays h4, black plays king g4 and he is in time to take the pawn. Whereas if he plays king c2, we play king g4, king d2, king h3, and we take the pawn, and it's a draw. And now, let's move on to another exercise. It's white to move and win. So, we have to think how we are going to queen our pawn. And of course, we are going to queen our passed pawn on a4. If you thought a5 is a mistake, because this is the square, and black can reach it. He can play king d5, a6 and king c6, and black is in time to take the pawn. However, if we sacrifice a pawn with a move c6, black has to take, because otherwise we're going to queen our pawn, and now we move on a5, king d5 and a6, and now black cannot play king c6, his own pawn is an obstacle. So black loses. Now we are going to move on to some other examples where we can use our king as an obstacle to the opponent's king. So we can see that the black king is inside the square of the pawn. So what we are going to do now, we can use our king as an obstacle. The move is king f6, king d7 and king f7. Now the king cannot pass and the pawn is going to reach the last rank. So now an important position is the one when the pawn has reached the 6th rank. So what happens here? In this position, what matters is who has the move. So the player who has the opposition reaches his goal. If it's white to move, so black has the opposition, then it's a draw, because after e7, king e8, king e6, it's stalemate. And if king g6, king e7, king f5 and king e8, a move we're going to see later on when we are going to discuss the defense when the opponent has one pawn, king f6 and king f8, we reach the same position as the beginning. However, if it's black to move, that means that white has the position. So black plays king e8 and after e7, king d7, white has the move king on f7. He supports the pawn and the pawn can queen. The h-pawn, however, is an exception. When the opponent reaches the corner, it's a draw. When the defensive side reaches the corner, it's a draw, no matter who has the opposition. So h7 and it's a stalemate, and it doesn't matter even if there are a lot of pawns, white cannot win. There will always be stalemate ideas. And now let's see an exception, which is the g-pawn. In this position, it's black to play and draw. You can think a little bit. If you thought king g8 is a mistake, because white can play g7, king h7 and king f7. However, if you thought king h8, you are correct, because king f7 is a stalemate, and if g7, then king g8, king g6, and if king g5, king g7, king h5, king g8, king h6, king h8, g7, and it's again a stalemate. So now we are going to discuss the very important defensive technique when the opponent has a pawn and the king is behind the pawn. Then there are two rules. The first one says that when we have to go to the back, we choose the square that is on the same file as the pawn. For example, in this position, if it was black to move, we would play king e6. The second rule says that when we can move in front of the pawn, it's usually the best move, so we do it. In this position it's white to move, white plays king f3, and we have to go to the back, so we play king e6, king f4, and now we have to take the opposition, king f6. We do not want to let the king move in front of the pawn. e5 check, king e6, second rule, king e5, and now we have to choose again where to go. We go to king e7, king d5, we take the opposition, king d7, king c5, king e6, we go in front of the pawn, king e7 again, king d5, king d7, e6, king e7, king e5, and now it's very important to go to e8. If we moved on d8, it's a mistake, because white plays king d6, and we reach a familiar position with the pawn on the 6th rank plus the opposition, white wins. King e8, e7, king f7, king d7. And if king e8, then king f6, king f8, king d6, we should not play king g8, we should follow the second rule, which says we always move in front of the pawn, if we can do so. So king e7, king f5, king e8, king e5, king e7, king d5, and it's a draw. Now let's make some exercises. Here it's white to play and win. I let you think for a few seconds. If you chose king h6, you are correct. King g6 is a mistake, because black can play king g8, king f5, king f7, and again it's a draw, if black follows the rules that we said before. However, we have to take the opposition and play king h6, and after king g8, king g6, king f8, f7, king e7, king g7, and it's a win. However, black can try something tricky. He can play king h8. And now, if we are not careful and play f7, it's a stalemate. So, we should move our king on f7, and after king h7 we play king e7, and it's a win for white, because he's going to queen the pawn. Let's move on to another example. Here, it's white to move. That means that black has the opposition, but that doesn't mean that it's a draw, because black cannot keep the opposition. White plays king d5, and wherever the black moves, we are going to take the opposition. If king d8, then king d6, and it's winning. Whereas if black plays king on e8, we play king e6, and again it's the same position. Let's make a review. Let's move backwards. We said that the opposition is when there is an odd number of squares between the kings, diagonally, horizontally, or vertically. We said that the player who played last has the opposition, and the usage of the opposition is that we get to our opponent's side when, for example, the king moves on f6, we play king d5, and the opposite. We said about the rule of the square that we draw a square diagonally one line and then till we reach the rank of the pawn, and the rule says that if the king reaches the square, then he has time to take the pawn, otherwise the pawn is a queen. We said that we have to be careful when the pawn is on the initial rank, because it can move 2 steps forward. Also, we said that we can use our king as an obstacle in order to prevent the opponent from reaching the pawn, and then we can queen. About the pawn on the 6th rank, we said that whoever has the opposition reaches his goal. If it's white to play, it's a draw. If it's black to play, it's a win for white. The h pawn is an exception. The pawns on the edge in general have their own rules. And now, if the defensive king reaches the corner, it's always a draw. No matter how many pawns the opponent has, it's a draw. We saw this exception with king h8, and it's a draw with a g pawn. And now we said the defensive technique is to always stay on the same file as the pawn and take the position, and also when you can move in front of the pawn, it's usually the best move. We saw 2 exercises, and that was today's video. So if you like what you see, You can hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and also you can comment and tell me what would you like to see next. Thank you very much. See you on the next video.